When one accidental emoji destroys the carefully built walls between a junior accountant and her untouchable CEO, the fallout isn't just embarrassing, it's explosive. At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, Lena Carter's thumb slipped. One emoji, one photo, one man who was never supposed to notice her. But Adrian Voss noticed everything. And when he showed up at her door 2 hours later, she realized her mistake hadn't just cost her privacy. It had torn open something neither of them could close. Stay until the end to see how one moment of carelessness rewrote two lives forever. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The office building at Harmon and Voss Financial stood like a glass monument to money and ambition. 63 floors of steel and privilege overlooking downtown. Lena Carter worked on the 14th floor, tucked into a corner cubicle where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud and the coffee was always burnt by 9 a.m. She was good at being invisible. 3 years at the firm, and she'd perfected it. Head down, numbers accurate, never the first to speak in meetings. She'd watch colleagues claw their way toward executive favor, watch them angle for FaceTime with the partners, watch them crash and burn when they aimed too high. Lena didn't aim at all. She just worked. Adrian Voss was a different species entirely. CEO at 34. Self-made, they said, though Lena suspected that term got thrown around loosely when your family already had connections that mattered. He'd taken a mid-tier investment firm and turned it into something that made headlines. Sharp. Ruthless when he needed to be. The kind of man who walked into rooms and changed the air pressure. Lena had seen him exactly 4 times in 3 years. Twice in the elevator, she'd stared at the floor number display like it held the secrets of the universe. Once at the holiday party, where he'd given a speech about quarterly performance that somehow made profit margins sound almost inspiring. And once in the lobby when she'd been leaving late and he'd held the door without looking at her face. She preferred it that way. Her apartment was a studio in a building that had probably been nice in 1987. The rent was almost reasonable. The neighbors were quiet, and it was hers. Tuesday night, she'd gotten home at 10:30, microwaved leftover pad thai, and collapsed onto her couch with her phone. Social media was her wind-down ritual. Mindless scrolling, double-tapping pictures of friends' vacation photos, watching videos of dogs doing stupid things. She wasn't really paying attention, just letting her brain unspool after a day of reconciling accounts that didn't want to reconcile. That's when she saw it. The company's official Instagram had posted a feature on Adrian, some leadership profile piece. The photo showed him in his office, leaning against his desk, arms crossed, black shirt, sleeves rolled up. The photographer had caught him mid-sentence, probably answering some question about his business philosophy or morning routine or whatever the hell executives talked about in puff pieces. He looked good. Annoyingly good. Lena scrolled past it, then scrolled back. She didn't follow this company account. Why would she? But the algorithm had decided she needed to see it. She zoomed in slightly, taking in details she'd never noticed in person. The watch that probably cost more than her car. The way his jaw was set. Like even in a staged photo, he was thinking 3 moves ahead. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't mean to tap anything. She was literally just holding her phone, half asleep, pad thai getting cold on the coffee table. But she did tap, and instead of a simple like, her traitorous thumb landed squarely on the emoji reactions. The fire emoji. It posted before she could stop it, before her brain could catch up to what her hand had done. The little animation popped up, flames dancing across the screen, and Lena's entire body went cold. No, 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 no. She fumbled with her phone, fingers suddenly clumsy. Could she unreact? Was that a thing? She tapped frantically, trying to undo it, but the app lagged for a split second, long enough for her panic to spike into full-blown dread. She managed to remove the reaction after what felt like an eternity, but was probably 5 seconds. It didn't matter. The notification had already gone out. Somewhere in the city, possibly in some penthouse with a view that made her rent look like even more of a joke, Adrian Voss's phone had lit up with a message. Lena Carter _14 reacted to your photo. Oh my God. She dropped her phone like it had burned her. Oh my God. Her heart was doing something arrhythmic and unpleasant. This was bad. This was so bad. She worked in accounting, for crying out loud. She wasn't some intern fresh out of college who could play it off as youthful enthusiasm. She was a grown woman who'd just essentially catcalled her CEO on social media. She paced the length of her small apartment. Maybe he wouldn't see it. Maybe his notifications were turned off. Maybe he had someone manage his social media and they'd just ignore random employee reactions. Maybe she should update her resume. Her phone buzzed. Lena stared at it like it might explode. It buzzed again. She forced herself to pick it up. Instagram notification. Adrian Voss followed you. Her stomach dropped through the floor. That wasn't possible. He didn't even follow the company account back. His Instagram had maybe 200 followers, all of them probably people who actually mattered. Executives, business partners, people who summered in the Hamptons and used summer as a verb, not junior accountants who lived in studio apartments and ate leftover takeout for dinner. Another notification. Adrian Voss liked your photo. She opened her profile with shaking hands. He'd liked a picture from 4 months ago. Her, at her friend Casey's birthday dinner, laughing at something off camera. She was wearing a blue dress, hair down for once, genuinely happy. It was so far down her feed he'd have to have scrolled to find it. What is happening right now? Her phone buzzed a third time. Message request from Adrian Voss. Lena sat down hard on her couch. This wasn't real. This was a stress dream brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. She'd wake up tomorrow and none of this would have happened. She opened the message. Interesting choice of emoji. 3 words. That was all it said. No context, no elaboration, just a statement that could mean absolutely anything or nothing at all. She should ignore it. Delete the message request, set her account to private, maybe fake her own death and move to a different city. Instead, her fingers typed, accident. I'm so sorry. The response came so fast he must have been waiting. Was it? 2 words this time, somehow worse than 3. Lena's brain was short-circuiting. What did that mean? Was he angry? Amused? Was this some kind of test? She tried to imagine what HR would say about this situation and came up blank because this situation was so far outside normal parameters that no employee handbook had prepared her for it. She typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on, yes, completely. I wasn't paying attention. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You're Lena Carter. Counting. 14th floor. It wasn't a question. Yes, she typed, because what else could she say? I know your work. The Brennan audit last quarter. That was you. She blinked. The Brennan audit had been a nightmare. A tangled mess of offshore accounts and creative bookkeeping that had taken her 6 weeks to untangle. She'd submitted the report to her supervisor, who'd passed it up the chain. She'd assumed it had disappeared into the void like everything else she produced. I was part of the team, she wrote carefully. You found the discrepancy everyone else missed, saved the firm a lawsuit. Her chest did something complicated. He knew her work. Adrian Voss knew her work. Just doing my job. You're good at it. She stared at those 4 words for a long moment. This conversation had veered so far from where she'd expected it to go that she had no map, no script, no idea what came next. Thank you, she finally typed. The typing indicator appeared again. This time it stayed for almost a minute. I'm downstairs. Lena read the message 3 times. What? Your building. I'm downstairs. Apartment 4C, right? Her blood turned to ice. How do you know where I live? Employee records. Are you going to let me up, or should I wait in the lobby? This was insane. This was beyond insane. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, and her CEO was apparently standing in her lobby asking to come up to her apartment. She should say no. She should block him and call someone. HR? The police? A therapist? Why are you here? She typed. Because you reacted to my photo with a fire emoji at 11:47 p.m., then panicked and deleted it. Because you've worked at my company for 3 years and never once tried to get my attention. Because I want to know if it was really an accident, and if it was, then I'll apologize for showing up uninvited and leave. And if it wasn't? The reply came instantly. Let me up and find out. Lena's hands were shaking. This was a bad idea. This was potentially the worst idea in a lifetime of generally safe, sensible choices. Adrian Voss wasn't just her CEO, he was untouchable, powerful, the kind of man who existed in a different atmosphere than people like her. She should tell him to leave. She buzzed him in. The 60 seconds it took for him to reach her door felt like an hour. She looked around her apartment with fresh horror. The dishes in the sink, the laundry draped over the chair, the stack of paperbacks on the floor because she'd run out of shelf space. This wasn't a place designed for visitors, especially not visitors who probably had penthouses with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than her annual salary. The knock was firm, confident. Lena smoothed down her shirt, an old college sweatshirt with a coffee stain near the hem, and opened the door. Adrian Voss stood in her hallway, and he was somehow more real than he'd ever been in the elevator or across a crowded lobby. Tall, close to 6'2". Dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it recently. Those same rolled sleeves from the photo. He'd loosened his collar, and there was something about seeing him slightly undone that made her mouth go dry. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Can I come in?" She stepped back and he walked past her into the apartment. He didn't look around with judgment or amusement. He just looked at her. "You want to sit?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at the couch. "Sure." They sat. Not close, but not far enough that she couldn't smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that probably had a French name. "This is weird," Lena said, because someone had to say it. "Yeah." He almost smiled. "It is. You shouldn't be here." "Probably not. I could report this to HR." "You could." He leaned back slightly, completely at ease. "Will you?" "I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure out what's happening." "What's happening," Adrian said slowly, "is that I saw a notification from someone I've noticed for months, and instead of ignoring it like I should have, I decided to do something about it." Lena's brain snagged on one word. "Noticed? You think I don't pay attention to what happens in my own company?" He shifted, angling toward her. "You're careful, Lena, competent. You don't play politics, you don't chase promotions you haven't earned, and you're the only person on the 14th floor who's never once tried to engineer a conversation with me. Because that would be inappropriate. And yet here we are." She didn't have a response to that. "The emoji," Adrian said. "Was it really an accident?" Lena looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were dark gray, almost slate. There were faint lines at the corners, like he smiled more than his reputation suggested. His jaw was set in that same way it had been in the photo, but this close she could see the slight tension there, like he was holding something back. She could lie. Should lie. Smooth this over and get him out of her apartment and go back to being invisible. "I don't know," she said instead. His expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something warmer than she'd expected. "That's honest. I was half asleep. I wasn't thinking. But," she hesitated. "Maybe some part of me meant it. I don't know. And now?" "Now I think my CEO showed up at my apartment at midnight, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm about to get fired or..." "Or?" She met his eyes. "I don't know what the or is." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm out of my mind." "Pretty sure I already think that." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Fair. But here it is anyway." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't do casual. I don't have time for games or half measures or pretending I feel things I don't. When I know what I want, I go after it. And I've known for months that I wanted to talk to you. But there was no good way to do it without it looking like exactly what everyone would assume it was. Which is? Powerful boss pursuing employee, abusive position, all the things HR exists to prevent. And this isn't that?" "I don't know what this is yet," Adrian said, "but I know I saw that notification and I thought, finally, an opening, a reason to stop pretending I haven't been looking for you in rooms you're not in." Lena's heart was doing that arrhythmic thing again. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you're..." She gestured at him, at the space between them. "You're you, and I'm me. This doesn't make sense. Most things that matter don't make sense at first. That's a very CEO thing to say. Stop thinking of me as your CEO for a minute. Kind of hard when you're literally my CEO. Try." She took a breath, looked at him without the context of office hierarchy or power dynamics. Just a man sitting on her couch, looking at her like she was something worth the trip across the city at midnight. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'm trying." Better. He held her gaze. Have dinner with me. When? Tomorrow night. That's not enough notice. Thursday, then. I don't. Lena. He said her name like he'd been practicing it. I'm not going to push. If you want me to leave right now and never mention this again, I will. We go back to our separate floors and separate lives, and this was just a strange night we don't talk about. But if there's any part of you that wants to see where this goes, have dinner with me. No office, no titles, just you and me in a conversation. Every rational part of her brain was screaming. This was her boss. This was a terrible idea. This would end in disaster. But there was another part, smaller but insistent, that whispered, when was the last time you took a risk? When was the last time someone looked at you like that? One dinner, she heard herself say. One dinner, Adrian agreed. And if it's awful, then we tried and it didn't work. No harm, no pressure. She nodded slowly. Okay. He stood, and she did too. They were close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I'll text you details, he said. You have my number? Employee records, remember? Right. The mildly concerning amount of information you have about me. I could say the same about you. You know where I work. Everyone knows where you work. You're on billboards. One billboard, and it was the marketing team's idea. She almost laughed. You should go before my neighbors start asking questions. Probably, but he didn't move immediately. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't mean to send that emoji. Why? Because it means you weren't trying to get my attention. Which means this is real, not strategic. He left before she could figure out how to respond to that. Lena closed the door and stood in her apartment, pulse still racing, mind spinning. She'd just agreed to have dinner with Adrian Voss, her CEO, the man who'd shown up at midnight because of an accidental emoji. Her phone buzzed. Thursday, 7 p.m. I'll pick you up. And Lena? What? Don't overthink it. She laughed out loud, alone in her apartment. Too late for that. Wednesday passed in a blur of spreadsheets and second-guessing. Lena kept her head down, worked through lunch, and avoided eye contact with everyone. Casey called during her afternoon break. You sound weird, Casey said without preamble. I'm fine. That's exactly what people say when they're not fine. What happened? Lena looked around the empty break room. If I tell you, you have to promise not to judge me. When have I ever judged you? Last month when I ordered pineapple on pizza. That was different. That was a crime against Italian cuisine. This is real life. Spill. So Lena told her. The emoji, the messages, the midnight visit, the dinner invitation. Casey was silent for approximately 3 seconds. I'm sorry. Your CEO showed up at your apartment at midnight because you accidentally fire emojied his Instagram photo? That's the short version, yes. And you said yes to dinner? Apparently I did. Lena Marie Carter. Casey's voice had gone up an octave. This is either the best or worst decision you've ever made, and I can't figure out which. Join the club. What are you going to wear? I haven't thought about it. Liar. You've thought about nothing else since he left. She had, extensively. Her closet was a graveyard of business, casual, and weekend comfort. Nothing that said having dinner with a billionaire CEO who looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I have that black dress, Lena tried. The one from your cousin's wedding 3 years ago? It's classic. It's boring. You need something that says you're taking this seriously, but not so seriously that you're trying too hard. How is there an outfit that communicates all of that? There isn't, but we're going to find something close. I'm coming over tonight. Casey, you don't have to. 7 o'clock, I'm bringing wine. And possibly a priest to talk you out of this, but we'll see how I feel. She hung up before Lena could argue. Thursday arrived with the kind of inevitability that made Lena's stomach tight. She left work early, actually left early, which she never did, and went home to find Casey already there, somehow having convinced Lena's neighbor to let her in. Breaking and entering? Lena asked. Mrs. Chen loves me. Also, I brought her those cookies she likes. Casey was sprawled on the couch, looking entirely too comfortable. Now strip, fashion show time. They went through Lena's entire closet. The black dress was vetoed, so was the gray one, the navy one, and what Casey called corporate funeral chic. You own a lot of neutrals, Casey observed. I work in accounting. You're not going to an audit. You're going on a date with a man who probably has his suits custom made in Milan. That's not helping my anxiety. Casey pulled out a dress Lena had bought on impulse 6 months ago and never worn. Deep emerald green, sleeveless, hem just above the knee. Simple, but striking. This, Casey said firmly, it's too much. It's perfect. It says you made an effort without trying to be someone you're not. She tossed it at Lena. Put it on. It fit better than Lena remembered. The color did something good for her skin, made her eyes look brighter. She paired it with simple black heels and the silver earrings her mother had given her for graduation. Okay, Casey said, stepping back to assess. Now, you look like someone who accidentally fire emojied her CEO and somehow turned it into a date. I hate you. You love me. Now breathe. You're going to be fine. At 6:57 p.m., Lena's phone buzzed. Downstairs. Casey hugged her. Text me when you get home, or during dinner if you need an escape route. I'll fake an emergency. You're a good friend. I'm an incredible friend. Now go before you spiral. Lena grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. Adrian was waiting outside a black car that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Driver behind the wheel, rear door already open. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, white shirt open at the collar. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread on men who ran empires. Hi, she said. Hadi. His eyes traveled over her, quick but thorough. You look amazing. Thanks. You look very, CEO-ish. He smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. He held the door for her. The interior of the car smelled like leather and money. Lena slid across the seat, trying not to look as overwhelmed as she felt. Adrian got in beside her. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic. Where are we going? Lena asked. Place in Soho. Small, quiet. The chef's a friend. Of course he is. Adrian glanced at her. You're nervous. Wouldn't you be? Probably, but I'm good at hiding it. Must be nice. It's a skill you develop when people are always watching. He shifted slightly, his knee almost touching hers. You can relax, Lena. This is just dinner. Just dinner with my CEO in a car that costs more than my life. I'm not your CEO tonight, remember? You keep saying that like it makes it true. Doesn't it? She looked at him. In the low light of the car, with the city sliding past the windows, he looked less like an untouchable executive and more like just a man who'd taken a risk on a strange situation. I guess we'll find out, she said. The restaurant was exactly what he'd promised. Small, intimate, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. They were shown to a table in the back corner, away from the handful of other diners. Wine appeared. Menus that didn't list prices. Order whatever you want, Adrian said. That's ominous. Why? Because it implies there are things on this menu that require that disclaimer. He laughed, a real laugh, not the polite CEO chuckle she'd heard in meetings. Fair point, but I meant it. This is my treat. They ordered. Lena went with something she could pronounce and didn't require YouTube tutorials to eat properly. Adrian ordered in what sounded like flawless Italian, and the waiter looked delighted. Show off, Lena muttered. I spent 2 years in Rome. It stuck. Of course you did. You're determined to be intimidated by me, aren't you? I'm an accountant from Minnesota who lives in a studio apartment. You're a CEO who spent 2 years in Rome and has drivers. Yeah, I'm a little intimidated. Adrian leaned forward. Minnesota, huh? Where? St. Paul. What brought you here? College, NYU. I was going to go back after graduation, but she shrugged. The city got under my skin, stayed for a job that turned into a career. You miss it, Minnesota? Sometimes, mostly around the holidays. My parents are still there. Younger brother just started college himself. You're close with them? Yeah, they're good people. Dad's a high school math teacher. Mom runs the local library. Very normal, very steady. Sounds nice. There was something in his voice, not wistfulness exactly, but something adjacent to it. What about your family? Lena asked. Complicated. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. He took a sip of wine. We can get into family history, but that feels like third date territory. Assuming there's a third date. Assuming there's a second. The food arrived, and it was absurdly good. They ate and talked about nothing important. Favorite books, worst movies they'd ever seen, places they wanted to travel. Lena found herself relaxing despite every instinct telling her this was surreal. Adrian was easy to talk to when he wasn't being her CEO. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers. And when he did talk, he was funny in a dry, understated way that caught her off guard. "Okay, I have to ask," Lena said over dessert. "Why me? Why not you?" "That's not an answer either." He set down his fork. "You want honesty?" "Preferably. You're smart. You're good at what you do without needing everyone to notice. You don't perform competence. You just have it. And you look at me like I'm a person, not a position." He paused. "That's rare." Lena's chest tightened. "I'm still not convinced this is a good idea. Good ideas are overrated." Says the man who built a financial empire. "I built it by taking risks everyone else thought were stupid." He held her gaze. "This feels like a good risk. And if it's not, then we'll deal with it. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." The car took them back to her apartment. Adrian walked her to the door, hands in his pockets, looking less polished than he had at the start of the night. "I had a good time," Lena said. "Yeah?" He smiled. "Me too. This is still complicated. Most things worth doing are." She unlocked her door, then turned back to him. "Second date? You asking or telling? Testing the waters?" "Then yes. Absolutely yes." He leaned in, and for a second she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, brief, warm, deliberate. "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Adrian." She watched him walk back to the car, watched it pull away into the night. Then she went inside, closed the door, and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed. "Saturday? I'll keep it casual this time. Promise." She smiled. "Deal." One. Saturday wasn't casual. He took her to a gallery opening in Chelsea, his friend's exhibit, he explained, and he'd promised to show up. Lena wore jeans and a blazer, feeling underdressed the moment they walked in. "Relax," Adrian murmured, his hand light on her lower back. "Half these people are wearing sneakers that cost $1,000. You're fine." The art was abstract and vaguely unsettling. People stood around with wine glasses, nodding seriously at canvases that looked like someone had spilled paint and called it genius. "Do you actually like this stuff?" Lena whispered. "Some of it. That one over there looks like a migraine." She laughed, and a few people glanced over. Adrian didn't seem to notice or care. His friend, Marcus, tall and enthusiastic, found them an hour in. "Voss, you actually came." "Said I would. And you brought someone. This is new." Marcus extended a hand to Lena. "Marcus Chen. I've known this guy since college, and I've never seen him bring a date to one of these." "Lena Carter. And technically this is just our second date, so no pressure or anything." "Second date and he's already dragging you to art openings? That's either confidence or desperation." "Confidence," Adrian said dryly. "Obviously." They stayed another hour. Adrian introduced her to people whose names she immediately forgot, and he did it in a way that made it clear she wasn't an accessory. She was with him, by choice, and that mattered. Afterward, they walked. No car, no plan, just blocks of city sidewalk and the November air turning crisp. "Your friend seems nice," Lena said. "He's one of the good ones. Doesn't care about the money or the business, just wants to make weird art and argue about philosophy." "You miss that?" "What?" "College, before everything got so corporate." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but I don't regret the path I took. I'm good at what I do." "That's not the same as loving it." "No," he admitted, "it's not." They stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change. Lena looked up at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "What do you actually want out of this? Out of whatever this is?" Adrian turned to face her fully. The streetlight caught his features, made his expression unreadable for a second before he answered. "Something real," he said. "I spend most of my life in rooms where everyone wants something from me. A favor, a deal, access. It's exhausting. And then I saw your name on that notification and I thought, here's someone who doesn't want anything, who didn't even mean to get my attention. That felt like a starting point." "For what?" For whatever comes next. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know this is fast, I know it's weird, but I don't want casual, Lena. I don't have the time or the interest. So if that's what you're looking for, tell me now and we can end this before it gets messy. Her heart was racing. And if I'm not looking for casual, then let's see where this goes. The light changed. They crossed the street. Okay, Lena said. Okay? Yeah, let's see where it goes, Ice. Adrian smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less burdened. Good. He took her hand. It should have felt like too much, too soon. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They walked for another 20 minutes before finding a cab. Adrian dropped her off with another one of those forehead kisses that made her chest ache in strange ways. Inside her apartment, Lena texted Casey. I think I'm in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? Don't know yet. Maybe both. That's the best kind. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into something that resembled a rhythm. Dinners, walks, a terrible action movie that they left halfway through because neither of them could take it seriously. Adrian texted her throughout the day, not constantly, but enough that she found herself looking forward to her phone buzzing. At work, nothing changed. He didn't seek her out, didn't show favoritism, didn't give anyone reason to suspect anything. It should have felt like a secret, but it didn't. It felt like they were protecting something fragile until it was strong enough to withstand scrutiny. 3 weeks in, he invited her to his place. Just dinner, he said over the phone. I'll cook. You cook? I have skills beyond hostile takeovers and quarterly earnings calls. His apartment was in Tribeca, and it was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, the kind of kitchen that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. But there were personal touches too. Books stacked on the coffee table, a framed photo of him and Marcus at what looked like graduation, a worn leather jacket draped over a chair. This is nice, Lena said, taking it in. It's home. He was already pulling ingredients from the fridge. You like pasta? Who doesn't like pasta? He cooked, and she watched from the counter, sipping wine and asking questions that made him laugh. The food was good, genuinely good, not just good for someone who probably had a private chef on speed dial. They ate at the dining table, overlooking the city lights. I could get used to this view, Lena said. Yeah? Don't let it go to your head. Too late. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Lena tucked her feet under her, feeling more relaxed than she had in years. Can I ask you something serious? Adrian said. But that's an ominous opening. Your work, are you happy there? She considered the question. I'm good at it. It's stable. Why? Because you're better than what you're doing. The Brennan audit, that should have put you on a different track. And it didn't because your supervisor took credit. Lena blinked. How do you know that? I pay attention. And I don't like seeing talent wasted. So what are you saying? I'm saying you should be in a role that challenges you, that recognizes what you're capable of. Adrian? She set down her wine glass. If you're about to offer me a promotion because we're seeing each other, I'm not. If anything, dating me makes that more complicated, but I'm saying you should want more. And when you're ready, when this, he gestured between them, is established enough that it doesn't look like favoritism, I want to make sure you get what you've earned. It should have felt patronizing. Instead, it felt like someone finally seeing her clearly. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Yeah, when the time's right, we'll figure it out. He pulled her closer, and she let him. They sat like that for a long time, the city sprawling below them, and Lena thought maybe this wasn't such a terrible risk after all. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, nothing this good comes without a cost. She ignored it, for now. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday morning in early December. Lena was at her desk, halfway through her second coffee, when her supervisor, Karen, stopped by her cubicle with a stack of files that looked ominous. New project, Karen said, dropping them with a thud. Patterson merger, they want a full audit of their subsidiary accounts before we finalize anything. Lena flipped through the top folder. Timeline? 2 weeks, maybe less if Patterson's team gets antsy. That's not realistic for something this size. Karen shrugged. Take it up with upstairs. They want it fast, they want it thorough, and they want you on it. Me specifically? You specifically. Karen's expression was unreadable. Apparently someone thinks you're up for it. She left before Lena could ask who that someone was. Lena stared at the files, unease creeping up her spine. This wasn't normal. Projects this significant didn't just land on junior accountants' desks without explanation. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to Adrian, then deleted it. They'd been careful. So careful. No messages during work hours unless absolutely necessary. No lingering looks in the elevator. Nothing that would give anyone reason to connect them. But this felt connected. Her phone buzzed, a text from Casey. "Lunch today? Need to talk." Lena frowned. Casey's texts were usually full of emojis and exclamation points. This one was flat. "Sure." "Usual place?" "Yeah." Noon. The diner 3 blocks from the office was their regular spot. Booths with cracked vinyl, coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning, and waitresses who didn't care if you camped out for an hour. Casey was already there when Lena arrived, picking at a salad she clearly hadn't touched. "Hey," Lena slid into the booth. "What's wrong?" Casey looked up, and her face was tight. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Okay." "Are you sleeping with Adrian Voss?" The question hit like cold water. Lena's stomach dropped. "What?" "Someone at my office mentioned seeing you two at that gallery opening in Chelsea, together, looking very coupley." "Casey, I'm not judging. I mean, I am a little because you didn't tell me it was getting serious, but mostly I'm worried. Because if people are noticing Lena, that's a problem." Lena's mouth had gone dry. "We've been discreet." "Clearly not discreet enough." Casey leaned forward. "Look, I get it. He's hot, he's successful, and apparently he cooks, but he's also your boss. And if this blows up, you're the one who's going to take the hit, not him." "It's not like that. It's always like that." Casey's voice softened. "I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm saying the world doesn't care about nuance when it comes to this stuff. You're the junior employee. You're the one who'll get labeled as sleeping your way up." "I haven't gotten anything from this relationship. Haven't you?" Casey gestured at nothing. "How long until someone notices you're getting better assignments? More FaceTime with executives? Lena, I love you, but you have to think about how this looks." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say Casey was wrong, that what she and Adrian had was separate from work, that she'd earned everything on her own merit. But the Patterson files sitting on her desk said otherwise. "I need to go," Lena said, sliding out of the booth. "Lena, wait. I'll call you later." She didn't. Back at the office, Lena buried herself in the Patterson audit. The numbers were a mess, deliberately complicated, layers of shell companies and offshore accounts that smelled like someone had been moving money they shouldn't. It was exactly the kind of challenge she usually loved. Now it just felt like evidence. Her phone buzzed at 4:30. "Dinner tonight?" "Adrian." She stared at the message, Casey's words echoing in her head. "Can't. Swamped with work." "The Patterson audit?" Her chest tightened. "How did you know about that?" "I'm the CEO, Lena. I know about everything. Did you assign it to me?" The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "We should talk." "Not over text." "Did you?" "Yes." Lena set her phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. What Casey had warned her about. Adrian using his position to push her forward, and her looking like she'd earned it on her back instead of her merit. Her phone rang. Adrian. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. "What?" she answered. "Don't do that." His voice was calm but firm. "Don't shut me out over text. You gave me that project. I recommended you for it. There's a difference." "Not to anyone who finds out we're seeing each other." "Who's going to find out?" "People already are, Adrian. Someone saw us at the gallery. It's getting around." Silence on the other end, then carefully. "Do you regret this?" "I regret that I can't tell if I'm good at my job or if I'm just good at dating the right person." "That's not fair, isn't it?" Her voice cracked slightly. "You've had 3 years to notice my work, but you didn't pay attention until I accidentally flirted with you on Instagram. Now suddenly, I'm getting assignments that should go to people with twice my experience. How is that supposed to look?" "It looks like I trust you with important work." "It looks like favoritism." "Lena." He exhaled slowly. "I gave you that project because you're the best person for it. The Brennan audit proved you can handle complex fraud patterns. Patterson is the same type of mess. That's not favoritism, that's strategy. And if we weren't dating, then I still would have recommended you, maybe a month from now instead of today, but you'd have gotten there. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe that her competence mattered more than who she was sleeping with. I need some space, she said quietly. How much space? I don't know. I need to think. Another pause. When Adrian spoke again, his voice was gentler. Okay. But Lena, don't let other people's opinions make you doubt yourself. You're brilliant at what you do, with or without me. He hung up before she could respond. Lena sat in her cubicle for a long time after that, staring at the Patterson files. Then she opened the first folder and got to work. The audit consumed the next 10 days. Lena worked late every night, unraveling transactions that had been deliberately obscured. She found discrepancies that would have tanked the merger if they'd gone unnoticed. She documented everything with meticulous precision, building a case that was airtight. She didn't text Adrian. He didn't text her either, though she caught him looking at her twice in the elevator. Both times, she looked away first. Karen seemed impressed when Lena submitted the preliminary report ahead of schedule. This is solid work, she said, flipping through pages. Really solid. I'm presenting this to the partners tomorrow. I'd like to present it myself, Lena said. Karen blinked. That's not usually how we do things. I know, but I did the work. I found the fraud. I want to be in the room when it matters. Something shifted in Karen's expression. Respect, maybe. Or surprise that Lena had finally grown a spine. I'll see what I can do. The partners' meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Lena wore her best suit, the one she'd bought for interviews 3 years ago and rarely touched since. She walked into that conference room on the 38th floor with her report printed and bound, her notes organized, and her hands only shaking slightly. Adrian was there. Of course he was. Sitting at the head of the table with 3 other senior partners, looking every inch the CEO who'd built this company into what it was. Their eyes met for half a second. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. Lena presented for 20 minutes. She walked them through every shell company, every suspicious transfer, every red flag that would have cost them millions if the merger had gone through dirty. She answered questions with confidence she didn't entirely feel, and when she was done, the room was quiet. One of the partners, Gerald, silver-haired and perpetually skeptical, leaned back in his chair. This would have buried us, he said. Yes, sir, Lena agreed. How'd you catch it when Patterson's own team missed it? They weren't looking for it. I was. Adrian spoke for the first time since she'd entered the room. Questions for Ms. Carter? There were a few. Technical things, clarifications. She answered them all. Thank you, Ms. Carter, Adrian said when they were done. Excellent work. She nodded and left before anyone could see her hands shaking. In the bathroom down the hall, Lena locked herself in a stall and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for weeks. She'd done it. On her own merit, with her own skills, she'd proven she belonged in rooms like that. Her phone buzzed. You were incredible in there. Adrian, thanks. Can we talk now? She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Smudged mascara, suit slightly wrinkled from stress sweat, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in days. Tonight. Your place. I'll be there. Adrian's apartment felt different when she arrived that evening. Or maybe she felt different. Less overwhelmed by the expensive furniture and the skyline view, more focused on the man standing in the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine already poured. Hi, he said. Hi. He handed her a glass. They stood there for a moment, the silence stretching. I'm sorry, Lena said finally, for shutting you out. Don't be. You needed to prove something to yourself. I get it. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My work, us, whether I was actually good enough or just good enough adjacent. Adrian set his glass down and moved closer. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met. You see patterns other people miss. You don't give up when things get complicated. That's not because of me. That's just who you are. But the project would have gone to someone. I made sure it went to you because I knew you could handle it. Was that influenced by us? Maybe. But you still had to do the work. And you did it better than anyone else would have. Lena took a shaky breath. Casey thinks I'm making a mistake. That this is going to blow up in my face. Casey might be right. He said it gently, but didn't soften the truth. This is complicated. We work together. I have power you don't. If this gets out before we're ready, yeah, it's going to be messy. People are going to make assumptions. So what do? We're careful. We're smart. And when the time is right, we go public on our terms. He cupped her face in his hands. But Lena, I need you to know something. I'm not doing this halfway. I don't know how to do that. So if you're not sure, if you think this is too complicated or too risky, tell me now. She looked up at him, at the man who'd shown up at her door because of an accidental emoji, who'd taken her to dinner and listened like her words mattered, who'd given her space when she needed it and hadn't made her feel small for doubting. I'm sure, she said. He kissed her then. Finally, after weeks of forehead kisses and restrained touches, he actually kissed her. It was slow and deliberate and made her knees weak in ways that should have been embarrassing but weren't. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he said. Okay. They moved to the couch, wine forgotten. Lena curled into his side, and for the first time in weeks, the knot in her chest loosened. Tell me about your family, she said. The complicated one you won't talk about. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. My father built this company, started from nothing, worked his way up, all the usual mythology. But he was also controlling, demanding. Nothing was ever good enough. When I took over after he retired, half the board thought I'd run it into the ground within a year. But you didn't. No, I made it better, bigger, more profitable. And he still found ways to criticize. He paused. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. I'm sorry. Don't be. We had a complicated relationship. I respected what he built, but I didn't like him very much as a person. He glanced at her. My mother's different. You'd like her. She's sharp, doesn't take anyone's crap, and she's been asking when I'm going to bring someone home for dinner. Lena's stomach flipped. Home for dinner? Eventually, when you're ready. No pressure. Meeting the family feels like a big step. It is, but we've already taken bigger ones. She couldn't argue with that. They talked until late, about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about college, about Marcus and their terrible apartment, and the time they'd tried to start a tech company that had failed spectacularly. Lena told him about Minnesota winters and her brother's terrible taste in girlfriends, and the year she'd tried to become a marathon runner and gave up after 3 weeks. It was easy, comfortable in a way that made her forget they were supposed to be complicated. Around midnight, they moved to the bedroom. Adrian lent her a t-shirt that hung to her knees. They lay facing each other in the dark, and Lena traced patterns on his chest. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What happens if this doesn't work out? Why are you asking that now? Because I need to know if you've thought about it, if you have an exit plan. Adrian caught her hand, held it against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. I don't have an exit plan. I don't want one. I told you, I don't do this halfway. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. He pulled her closer. But some things are worth being terrified for. She fell asleep in his arms, and for once, her brain shut up long enough to let her rest. The morning brought coffee and the smell of something cooking. Lena found Adrian in the kitchen, making eggs like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're very domestic for a CEO, she observed. I have hidden depths. He slid a plate across the counter. Eat. Then I'm taking you somewhere. Where? You'll see. An hour later, they were in Central Park. Saturday morning, cold enough that Lena's breath fogged, but clear and bright. Adrian had brought coffee in travel mugs, and they walked the paths like normal people instead of CEO, an employee hiding a relationship. I used to come here when I first took over the company, Adrian said, when everything felt like it was about to collapse, and I couldn't breathe in that office anymore. Does it still feel like that? Sometimes. Less now, because you're better at the job? Because I have something outside the job that matters. Lena stopped walking. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because it's too much, too fast. We've been doing this for, 6 weeks? 7, and I'm not good at pretending I feel less than I do. He turned to face her fully. I know this is fast, I know it's intense, but I've spent 15 years building a company, and in all that time, I never once felt like I was missing something. Then you showed up, or didn't show up. You were always there, I just finally noticed, and suddenly everything else feels less important. Adrian, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just telling you where I am. Lena looked at him, this impossible man who'd rewritten her careful, planned life in a matter of weeks. You're insane. Probably. I'm not there yet, where you are. I know. But I want to be. His smile was bright enough to rival the winter sun. That's enough. They walked for another hour talking about nothing important, and Lena let herself feel happy without questioning it. It wouldn't last. Happiness never did. Not the uncomplicated kind. But for now, it was real. Her phone rang as they were leaving the park. Casey. I should take this, Lena said. Adrian nodded, stepping away to give her privacy. Hey, Lena answered. Hey yourself, you've been avoiding me. I've been busy. With work or with him? Lena sighed. Both. Look, I'm sorry about the other day. I came on too strong. It's your life, your choice. I just worry. I know. And you're not wrong to worry. This is risky. But you're doing it anyway? Yeah, I am. Casey was quiet for a moment. Okay, then I'm here. Whatever happens, I'm here. Thanks, Case. But if he breaks your heart, I'm slashing his tires. That seems fair. They hung up, and Lena felt lighter. Adrian was waiting by the park entrance, hands in his pockets, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, Casey's protective. Good. You should have people who look out for you. They grabbed lunch at a diner that was definitely not the kind of place CEOs usually ate. Adrian ordered a burger and ate it without complaint, even when grease dripped onto his expensive shirt. You're going to regret that stain, Lena said. I have other shirts. How many shirts does one person need? Apparently fewer than I own. The afternoon disappeared into easy conversation, and a movie they barely watched because they spent most of it talking through it. By the time Adrian dropped her off at her apartment that evening, Lena felt steady again. Thank you, she said before getting out of the car. For what? For being patient, for not pushing. I told you, I'm in this. However long it takes. She kissed him goodbye, and it felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Inside her apartment, Lena's phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. You should be careful who you trust. Her stomach turned cold. Who is this? No response. She stared at the message for a long time before screenshotting it and sending it to Adrian. His call came within 30 seconds. Where are you? His voice was tight. Home. What is this? I don't know, but I'm coming over. Adrian, it's probably nothing. It's not nothing. Lock your door. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up before she could argue. Lena locked her door and checked it twice. Then she checked the windows for good measure, feeling ridiculous and paranoid and increasingly unsettled. Adrian arrived in 8 minutes. She buzzed him up and opened the door to find him looking grim. Let me see your phone, he said without preamble. She handed it over. He studied the message, his jaw working. This number's been scrubbed. Burner phone, probably. How do you know that? Because I've seen this before. He looked at her. Someone's warning you off. The question is who and why. Maybe it's just a prank. Maybe. Or maybe someone knows about us and doesn't like it. Lena sat down heavily on her couch. This is what Casey was worried about. This isn't office gossip. This is someone trying to intimidate you. Adrian's expression darkened. I need to make some calls. To who? People who can figure out where this came from. Adrian, that sounds extreme. It is, but I don't take threats to people I care about lightly. The casual way he said it, people I care about, made her chest tight. What if it's about work? Lena asked. The Patterson audit. I exposed fraud. Maybe someone's unhappy about that. Adrian considered this. That's possible. Patterson had connections to some people who don't like being embarrassed. So this might not even be about us. Either way, we're taking it seriously. He sat beside her. I'm going to have security do a sweep of your building, and I want you to vary your routine for the next few weeks. Different routes to work, different times. You're scaring me. Good. You should be a little scared. Scared keeps you careful. She wanted to argue, wanted to say he was overreacting, but the message on her phone was still there, cold and threatening. Okay. she said quietly. Adrian pulled her against him, and she let herself be held. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, he said. You can't promise that. Watch me. That night, Adrian didn't leave. He stayed on her couch, checking his phone periodically, and when Lena finally went to bed around 2 a.m., she felt safer knowing he was there. But sleep didn't come easy, because somewhere out there, someone was watching, and they didn't want her close to Adrian Voss. The second message came 3 days later. Lena was walking to the subway after work when her phone buzzed. Different number, same scrubbed format. He's using you. Walk away while you still can. Her hands went cold despite her gloves. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, people streaming around her like water around a stone. The number was different, but the intention was the same. Someone wanted her scared. It was working. She called Adrian immediately. Another one? He asked without preamble. Yeah. Forward it to me. Are you still at the office? I'm 2 blocks away, heading to the subway. Don't. Stay where you are. I'm sending a car. Adrian, that's excessive. Lena. His voice had that edge she'd only heard once before, when a partner had tried to undermine him in a board meeting. Someone is escalating. First a warning, now they're trying to make you doubt me. That's targeted. That's personal. So please, just this once, don't argue with me. She wanted to push back, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But her heart was hammering, and her skin felt too tight, and she was tired of pretending this wasn't frightening. Okay, she said quietly. The car arrived within minutes, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who nodded at her without speaking. The ride to Adrian's building took 15 minutes through evening traffic, and Lena spent all of it staring at the message. Adrian was waiting in the lobby of his building. He took one look at her face and pulled her into the elevator without a word. Inside his apartment, he poured her a drink she didn't want but accepted anyway. My security team is working on tracing both numbers, he said, but whoever's doing this knows how to cover their tracks. What if they're right? The words came out before she could stop them. Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. About what? About you using me. What if this is all... She gestured vaguely. What if I'm just some project to you? Some challenge? Do you actually believe that? I don't know what to believe. Someone out there knows about us. Knows enough to target me specifically. And I keep thinking about what Casey said about how this looks from the outside. Adrian set his glass down with a controlled precision that somehow felt dangerous. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not using you. I have never used you. What we have is real, and it has nothing to do with your position at my company or what you can do for me professionally. Then why is someone trying so hard to break us up? Because I have enemies, people who'd love to see me distracted or vulnerable. People who lost money when we exposed the Patterson fraud. People who think they can get to me through you. Lena's stomach dropped. This is because of the audit. Probably. Patterson had silent partners, the kind who don't like being embarrassed or losing investments. And now they're coming after me because I did my job? They're coming after you because you're connected to me. If you were just the accountant who found the fraud, they'd have moved on. But you're the accountant who's sleeping with the CEO who greenlit the investigation. That makes you leverage. The word made her feel sick. I'm leverage. To them. Not to me. Never to me. He moved closer, his hands framing her face. But this is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I wanted to keep us quiet until we were ready. Because my world isn't safe, Lena. It's competitive and ruthless and full of people who see kindness as weakness. So what do? We don't let them win. We stay together, we stay smart, and we let my security team figure out who's behind this. And if they escalate beyond scary text messages, something shifted in Adrian's expression. Something cold and absolutely certain. Then they'll learn very quickly that threatening you was a mistake. The intensity in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in days. I don't want you doing anything illegal, she said. I won't have to. I have lawyers, investigators, and enough connections to make life very difficult for whoever's doing this, all within legal boundaries. Promise me. I promise. He kissed at her forehead. But I also need you to promise me something. What? If anything feels off, A strange call, someone following you, anything. You tell me immediately. No convincing yourself it's nothing. No trying to handle it alone. Lena nodded. Okay? I mean it. I know. Okay. They spent the evening in relative silence. Adrian made dinner, pasta again, because apparently that was his comfort food, and they ate while he worked on his laptop and she read a book she couldn't focus on. It was domestic and normal and completely at odds with the threat hanging over them. Around 10, Adrian closed his laptop and looked at her. Come to the Hamptons with me this weekend. Lena blinked. What? I have a house there, small, private, on the beach. We could both use a break from the city. Adrian, we can't just run away. We're not running. We're regrouping. And frankly, you'll be safer there than in your apartment. Is it that bad? I don't know yet, but I'd rather overreact and keep you safe than underreact and regret it. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist this was all overblown. But 2 threatening messages in 3 days said otherwise. Just the weekend? She asked. Just the weekend. I'll have you back Sunday night. Okay. His relief was visible. Good. But I'm telling Casey where I'm going. I'd expect nothing less. Friday afternoon, they left the city in Adrian's car, not the sedan with the driver, but a silver Audi he apparently kept in a garage somewhere and rarely drove. Lena watched the buildings give way to highway, then trees, then eventually the kind of sprawling properties that screamed old money. Small house, huh? She said when they pulled up to a 2-story beach house that was definitely not small. Everything's relative. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive but understated, lots of windows overlooking the ocean, furniture that looked comfortable instead of just decorative. Adrian dropped their bags in the entrance and immediately headed for the kitchen. Wine? He called. It's 4 in the afternoon. We're on vacation, different rules. She found him pulling a bottle from a wine fridge that probably cost more than her car. How often do you come here? Not often enough. Maybe once a month if I'm lucky. That seems like a waste. It is. But my mother loves it here, so I keep it maintained for her. Your mother comes here? She used to own it. Gave it to me when she downsized after my father died. He poured 2 glasses. She'll probably show up at some point this weekend. Fair warning. Lena nearly dropped her glass. What? I mentioned I was coming out here. She invited herself. That's how she operates. Adrian, I'm not ready to meet your mother. She's not scary. Well, she is, but not in a bad way. That doesn't help. He handed her the wine and led her to the deck overlooking the ocean. The beach was empty, waves rolling in steady and eternal. She's going to have questions, Lena said. Probably. And opinions. Definitely. You're not helping my anxiety here. Adrian sat in one of the deck chairs and pulled her down beside him. My mother is brilliant, opinionated, and fiercely protective. She's also the only person whose opinion I actually care about. If she likes you, and she will, then nothing else matters. And if she doesn't, then I'll deal with it. But Lena, she's going to like you. How can you possibly know that? Because I like you, and she trusts my judgment. That seems like circular logic. Welcome to family dynamics. They sat on the deck until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked fake but weren't. Adrian ordered takeout from a seafood place down the road, and they ate with their feet propped up and the ocean providing background noise. This is nice, Lena said eventually. Yeah? Yeah, quiet. We could do this more often, if you wanted. Come to the Hamptons? Have quiet. Whatever that looks like for us. She looked at him. In the fading light, he looked younger. Less like a CEO carrying the weight of an empire and more like just a man trying to figure out how to make space for something good. I'd like that, she said. His mother arrived Saturday morning. Lena was still in bed when she heard voices downstairs, Adrian's low rumble and a woman's voice that was warm but commanding. She bolted upright, suddenly very aware that she was wearing one of Adrian's t-shirts and nothing else. Lena? Adrian called up the stairs. You awake? Give me 5 minutes. She scrambled into jeans and a sweater, ran a brush through her hair, and tried to look like someone who belonged in this house. When she came downstairs, Adrian was in the kitchen with a woman who could only be his mother. Claire Voss was in her early 60s, tall and elegant in a way that suggested she'd never had an awkward phase in her life. Her hair was silver blonde, cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes were the same slate gray as Adrian's. You must be Lena, she said, extending a hand. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which means you're important. Lena shook her hand, trying not to feel like she was being evaluated. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Voss. Claire, please. Mrs. Voss makes me sound like I'm about to serve you tea and judge your posture. She glanced at Adrian. You didn't mention she was pretty. I told you she was smart. You tell me all your employees are smart. Pretty is more interesting. Lena's cheeks heated. Adrian just looked amused. Coffee? He offered. Please, Lena said. They sat at the kitchen island while Adrian made coffee with the kind of competence that suggested he'd been making his mother coffee his entire life. Claire watched Lena with open curiosity. So, Claire said, you work in accounting. Yes, ma'am. And you're dating my son despite the inherent power imbalance and potential HR nightmare. Lena nearly choked on air. Yes, I guess that's accurate. I guess. Good. I like honesty. Claire accepted a mug from Adrian. He needs someone who's not afraid to call him on his nonsense. Mom. What? You do. You're brilliant, but you have a tendency to think you're right about everything. It's exhausting. Adrian sighed. This is why I don't bring people home. You don't bring people home because you haven't dated anyone worth bringing home in 5 years. Claire turned back to Lena. Tell me how you two met. Lena glanced at Adrian, who looked faintly pained. I accidentally sent him a suggestive emoji on Instagram, she said. Claire blinked. Then she started laughing, a genuine, delighted sound. Oh, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. It was mortifying at the time, Lena admitted. I'm sure, but it got his attention, which I assume was the point. It actually wasn't. It was a complete accident. Even better. Claire looked at her son with something like affection. You showed up at her apartment, didn't you? How did you? Because you're your father's son. When James wanted something, he went after it directly. Sometimes too directly. She sipped her coffee. But he usually knew what was worth chasing. There was sadness in her voice, buried under the casual observation. Adrian's expression softened. How are you doing? He asked quietly. I'm fine, better. Some days are harder than others, but I'm fine. Claire straightened. But we're not here to talk about me. I want to know about Lena. They spent the next hour talking. Claire asked questions that were pointed but not intrusive, clearly trying to figure out who Lena was beyond the job title. Lena found herself relaxing despite the scrutiny. Claire was intimidating but not unkind, and there was a warmth to her that suggested she genuinely wanted to like whoever Adrian had brought home. Eventually, Claire stood. I'm going for a walk. You two enjoy your weekend. And Lena? Yes? He's difficult sometimes. Stubborn, workaholic, terrible at asking for help. But he's good. And if he's brought you here, it means you matter. Don't take that lightly. She left before Lena could respond. Adrian leaned against the counter, looking somewhat shell-shocked. That went better than expected. Did it? She didn't threaten you or give you a background check. That's practically a ringing endorsement. Lena laughed. Your family is intense. You have no idea. He pulled her close. But she's right. You matter. More than I probably should admit after 2 months. 2 months and 3 weeks, Lena corrected. You're counting, aren't you? Every day? They spent the rest of Saturday on the beach. The weather was cold enough that they had it mostly to themselves, just endless sand and crashing waves and the kind of quiet that only exists outside cities. Adrian pointed out landmarks, a jetty where he'd learned to fish, a stretch of beach where he'd once found a sand dollar intact. You were a beach kid, Lena observed. Summers, yeah. My mother insisted, said I needed to know there was more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets. She's smart. She's terrifying, but yes, also smart. That evening, Claire joined them for dinner at a restaurant that overlooked the water. She told stories about Adrian as a child, serious even then, always reading, always asking questions that adults found uncomfortable. Adrian bore it with remarkable patience, only occasionally interjecting to correct the record. He brought home a stray cat when he was 8, Claire said. Filthy thing, half wild. I told him we couldn't keep it. He gave me a 30-minute presentation on responsibility and commitment, PowerPoint slides and everything. I was very persuasive, Adrian said. You were insufferable, but you took care of that cat for 12 years, so I suppose you proved your point. Lena watched them, this easy dynamic between mother and son, and felt a pang of homesickness for her own family. She hadn't been home in 8 months, hadn't called her parents in weeks. "You okay?" Adrian asked quietly. "Yeah, just thinking about my mom." "You should call her, or better yet, we could visit. If you wanted." "You want to meet my parents?" "Eventually, when you're ready." Claire was watching them with something like approval. "I like her," she announced to Adrian as if Lena wasn't sitting right there. "I know you do. Don't mess this up. I'll do my best." Sunday morning, they drove back to the city. Lena felt recharged in a way she hadn't expected, like the weekend had given her space to breathe and remember that this thing with Adrian wasn't just stress and threats. It was also good. But the feeling lasted exactly as long as it took to get back to her apartment. There was an envelope taped to her door. Adrian saw it first. His entire body went rigid. "Don't touch it. It's just an envelope, Lena, don't touch it." He called someone while she stood there, heart pounding. Within 20 minutes, 2 men in suits showed up. "Security," Adrian explained. Private investigators he'd hired. They photographed the envelope from every angle before carefully removing it. Inside was a single photograph of Lena and Adrian on the beach. Yesterday. Someone had been watching. Lena's legs went weak. Adrian caught her, his arms solid around her waist. "Get her inside," one of the investigators said. "We'll process this and have a report by tomorrow." Adrian guided her into the apartment and locked the door behind them. Lena sat on the couch, shaking. "They were there," she said, "at your house, following us." "I know. How did they even know we'd be there?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." "Adrian, this is too much. This is beyond some business rival trying to intimidate me. This is stalking." "I know." His voice was cold in a way that made her look at him. His expression was controlled but furious. "And whoever's doing this just made a very serious mistake." "What are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." The certainty in his voice should have worried her. Instead, it made her feel fractionally safer. "I want to go to the police," Lena said. "We will, but my team needs to process everything first. Build a case that's airtight." "How long will that take?" "A few days, maybe a week." "And what do I do until then?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "You stay here. I stay here. We don't make it easy for them." "You can't just move in." "Watch me." "Adrian." "Lena." He sat beside her, his hands taking hers. "Someone followed us to the Hamptons, followed us to a private beach, and took photos without us knowing. That's not a warning anymore. That's surveillance. And I am not leaving you alone until we know who's behind this and what they want." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself, but the photo was still burned into her mind, her and Adrian on the beach, completely unaware they were being watched. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" "Stay, but we're telling the police tomorrow." Agreed. That night, neither of them slept well. Lena kept checking her phone for new messages. Adrian kept checking the locks on her door and windows like they might spontaneously open. Around 3 a.m., she found him standing at her window, staring out at the street below. "Come to bed," she said. "I'm trying to figure out who knew we'd be at the beach house." "Does it matter right now?" "Yes, because it means someone close to me is talking. Someone who knew my plans." Lena's stomach dropped. "You think someone at your company is involved?" "I think information is currency, and someone's selling mine. That's paranoid. That's experience." He turned to look at her. "I've built my career on reading people, Lena, on knowing who to trust and who's waiting for me to turn my back. And someone very close to my inner circle just sold out my weekend plans. What are you going to do about it?" "Find out who. Then make sure they can't do it again." The coldness in his voice made her shiver. This was a side of Adrian she hadn't seen before. The ruthless CEO who'd built an empire by being smarter and more brutal than his competition. "Don't do anything that'll get you in trouble," she said. "I won't have to. Betrayal has consequences all on its own." Monday morning brought answers Lena wasn't sure she wanted. Adrian's security team called at 8 a.m. The photo had been taken with a telephoto lens from a public access point on the beach. The envelope had no prints, no DNA, nothing useful. But they'd traced the pattern of messages and surveillance back to a source. Malcolm Patterson. The man whose fraud Lena had exposed. He's retaliating, Adrian said, pacing her apartment with his phone pressed to his ear. He lost his company, his reputation, and about $40 million because of that audit. And he blames both of us. Lena felt cold. What does he want? Adrian listened to whoever was on the other end of the line, his expression darkening. Understood. Keep digging. He hung up and looked at her. Patterson's made threats before. To other people who've crossed him. Usually they're empty, just trying to save face. But this feels different. Different how? More focused, more personal. He's not just angry about the money. He's angry that I chose to investigate him in the first place, and that you were good enough to find what his own people missed. So what do? We go to the police with everything we have, and then I make some calls of my own. To who? People who can make Patterson's life very uncomfortable very quickly. Lena grabbed his arm. Adrian, you can't. I'm not going to hurt him. I'm just going to remind him that threatening people I care about has consequences. Legal, financial, professional consequences. Promise me you won't do anything illegal. He looked at her and his expression softened. I promise. But Lena, I need you to understand something. I've spent 15 years in a world where showing weakness gets you destroyed. And you? He touched her face. You're the first thing in a very long time that's made me feel like there's more to life than winning. I'm not going to let anyone take that away. I'm not asking you to let them win. I'm asking you to be smart about this. I am being smart. Smart means overwhelming force applied strategically. Patterson will regret coming after you. They went to the police that afternoon, filed reports, handed over evidence, sat through questions that felt invasive and inadequate. The detective, a woman named Rodriguez, who looked tired and competent, assured them they'd investigate. How long will that take? Lena asked. Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on what we find. And until then, stay vigilant. Vary your routine. If you see anything suspicious, call us immediately. It wasn't enough. Lena could see it in Adrian's face, the frustration that law enforcement moved too slowly for someone used to making things happen. Outside the police station, Adrian made a call. Marcus, I need your help with something. Lena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she heard Adrian's side clearly enough. Patterson. Yeah, I need everything. Financials, associates, current projects, everything. A pause. Because he's threatening Lena, and I'm about to make him very sorry he did. He hung up and looked at her. Marcus has connections. People who specialize in finding information others want buried. That sounds illegal. It's not. It's just thorough. Adrian, I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to start a war over me. Yes, he said simply. I am. The certainty in his voice terrified and comforted her in equal measure, because Malcolm Patterson had made one critical miscalculation. He'd threatened the only thing Adrian Voss cared about more than his company, and that was a mistake he was about to pay for. Within 48 hours, Adrian had more information on Malcolm Patterson than Patterson probably had on himself. Marcus delivered it personally, showing up at Adrian's apartment Tuesday evening with a tablet full of files and a grim expression. Your instincts were right, Marcus said, sliding the tablet across the dining table. Patterson's hemorrhaging money. The fraud exposure tanked his remaining business ventures. He's leveraged to the eyeballs, creditors circling, and his reputation is demolished. Good, Adrian said coldly, but that makes him dangerous. Desperate people do stupid things. Lena, sitting beside Adrian, felt her stomach tighten. How desperate? Marcus glanced at her, then back at Adrian. He's been making calls to people who don't solve problems with lawyers. Are you saying he hired someone? Adrian's voice had gone dangerously quiet. I'm saying he's made contact with people who could, if they wanted to, make your lives very difficult. Whether money changed hands, I don't know yet. Find out. I'm working on it. But Adrian, you need to be careful. If Patterson thinks he's got nothing left to lose, then he's about to learn he was wrong. Adrian stood abruptly. I want everything. His financials, his associates, his morning coffee order. I want to know who he's talking to, what he's planning, and where he's vulnerable. I'm already on it. But what are you planning to do with this? Whatever I have to. Marcus looked at Lena. You okay with this? She wasn't sure how to answer. Part of her was terrified by how quickly Adrian had shifted into something calculating and ruthless. But another part, the part that had been looking over her shoulder for weeks, that had seen that photograph taped to her door, was relieved someone was finally taking this seriously. "I don't want anyone hurt," she said carefully. "No one's getting hurt," Adrian said, "but Patterson needs to understand that threatening you was the worst decision he's ever made." Marcus left with promises to call as soon as he had more intel. Lena watched Adrian pace the apartment, his mind clearly working through scenarios she couldn't see. "Talk to me," she said. "About what?" "About what you're thinking, because you've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're 3 moves ahead and none of them are good for whoever's on the other side of the board." He stopped pacing and looked at her. Patterson destroyed his own company through fraud and arrogance. When that caught up with him, instead of accepting responsibility, he decided to come after us. After you. So yes, I'm 3 moves ahead, and every single one of them ends with him regretting he ever heard your name. How? I'm going to dismantle what's left of his business empire. Every investor, every partner, every connection he still has. I'm going to make sure they know exactly who Malcolm Patterson is and what he's capable of. And when his creditors start calling in debts he can't pay, when his reputation is so toxic that no one will touch him with a 10-foot pole, maybe then he'll realize that threatening people I care about has consequences. Lena's chest tightened. You're going to ruin him. He ruined himself. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. That's not the same as justice. Justice is slow and uncertain. This is fast and guaranteed. Adrian, he crossed to her, taking her hands. I know this isn't comfortable for you. I know you want to believe the system will protect us. But I've been playing this game a long time, Lena. People like Patterson don't stop because a detective takes notes. They stop when the cost of continuing becomes unbearable. And you're going to make it unbearable. Yes. She looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man who'd built an empire by being smarter and more ruthless than his competition, who'd taken a struggling firm and turned it into something that made headlines. She'd seen glimpses of that intensity before, but always directed at business problems, abstract challenges. Now it was directed at protecting her. I don't want you to become someone you're not because of me, she said quietly. His expression softened. I'm not becoming anyone. This is who I've always been. You're just seeing it applied to something that actually matters. Wednesday morning, Lena went to work with a security detail she didn't want but couldn't refuse. 2 men in suits who followed at a discreet distance, scanning every face in the subway, every person who got too close. It should have made her feel safer. Instead, it made everything feel more real. Karen noticed immediately. What's with the bodyguards? She asked, appearing at Lena's cubicle with coffee and curiosity. Long story. I've got time. Lena hesitated. She'd kept her relationship with Adrian quiet for months, but the security detail made that impossible. Someone's been threatening me. It's related to the Patterson audit. Karen's expression shifted to concern. Threatening how? Messages. Following me. It escalated. Have you gone to the police? Yes. They're investigating, but in the meantime, she gestured vaguely at the security presence. Does Adrian know? The question was casual, but Lena caught the subtext. Why would you ask that? Because you've been different the last few months, more confident, and I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Lena's stomach dropped. Karen, relax. I'm not HR. And honestly, if you can handle Adrian Voss, you're braver than most. She sipped her coffee. Just be careful. Office relationships are complicated enough without adding death threats. They're not death threats. Yet. But Lena, seriously, be careful. And if you need anything, let me know. She left before Lena could figure out how to respond. The rest of the day passed in a blur of spreadsheets and anxiety. Lena kept checking her phone, waiting for updates from Adrian or the police or anyone who could tell her this was almost over. Instead, at 3:30 her phone rang. Unknown number. Her security detail was beside her instantly. Don't answer it, one of them said. It could be important. Or it could be him. Let it go to voicemail. She did. 30 seconds later, her voicemail notification pinged. The message was brief and made her blood run cold. You cost me everything. Patterson's voice was rough, angry. I hope he's worth it. Because when I'm done, you'll both wish you'd left well enough alone. The security guard took her phone, listened to the message, and immediately made a call. Within minutes, Lena was being escorted out of the building and into a car that took her straight to Adrian's office. He met her in the lobby, his face carved from stone. "Let me hear it." She played the voicemail. Adrian listened without expression, but she could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "That's a direct threat," he said. "That gives the police probable cause." "For what?" "To bring him in. To put restrictions on him. To make his life a bureaucratic nightmare." He handed her phone back to his head of security. "Send that to Detective Rodriguez and get me everything we have on Patterson's current location." Already on it, Adrian guided Lena to the elevator. They rode to the 63rd floor in silence. Inside his office, all glass and steel and commanding views, he finally let some of the tension show. "I should have moved faster," he said. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it? I'm the one who pushed for the Patterson investigation. I'm the one who put you in the room with the partners. I painted a target on your back and I didn't protect you well enough. Adrian, I made my own choices. I did that audit because it was the right thing to do, not because you told me to. And now you're paying for it. So are you. He threatened both of us." "I can handle threats. I've been handling them my entire career." He turned to face her fully. "But you shouldn't have to. You should be safe to do your job without worrying about vindictive criminals leaving messages on your voicemail. Welcome to your world, apparently." He almost smiled. "Yeah, welcome to it." His phone rang. Marcus. "Talk to me," Adrian answered, putting it on speaker. "Patterson's at his apartment, Upper West Side. My contact says he's been there all day, making calls, sounding increasingly unhinged. The police are moving on him?" "Rodriguez said they're getting a warrant. Should have it within the hour." "Good. What else?" "His financials are worse than we thought. He's got maybe 2 weeks before his creditors start seizing assets. And I found the connection you were looking for." Adrian's expression sharpened. "Who?" "Richard Chen. He's on your board." Lena watched Adrian's face go carefully blank. "Chen leaked my schedule." "Looks like it. Patterson's been paying him for information, small amounts, but consistent over the last 6 weeks." "How long have you known Richard?" Lena asked quietly. 8 years. He was one of my first board appointments." Adrian's voice was flat. "I trusted him." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. This is useful information." He looked at Marcus through the phone. "What's Chen's exposure?" "Legal. Probably minimal unless you want to push corporate espionage charges. Professional? That's up to you. I want him gone. Off the board, out of the company, and unemployable in this industry." "Adrian," Marcus's voice held a warning. "That's scorched earth. He sold out my location to a man who's threatening Lena. Scorched earth is generous." Lena touched his arm. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call an emergency board meeting. I'm going to present evidence of Chen's betrayal, and I'm going to make sure everyone in our industry knows exactly what he did. He'll never work at this level again." "That's cruel." "That's consequences." Adrian's eyes were cold. He had a choice. He chose wrong. Now he lives with it. Marcus sighed through the phone. "I'll send you everything I have. But Adrian, be smart about this. Don't let anger make you sloppy." "I'm never sloppy." "There's a first time for everything." Adrian ended the call and immediately started typing emails. Lena watched him work. This side of him she was still learning. The ruthless executive who'd built his empire by being smarter and more brutal than everyone else. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. He looked up. "Regret what?" "Being this person. The one who has to make these kinds of decisions." "Every day." The honesty surprised her. "But someone has to, and I'm good at it, better than most." "That's not the same as wanting to be." "No, it's not." He saved whatever he was working on and came around the desk. "When this is over, when Patterson's dealt with and you're safe, I want to take a break. Real time off. Somewhere that doesn't have cell service or board meetings or people trying to destroy each other over percentages." "Where would we go?" "Anywhere you want, as long as it's far from here." "That sounds impossible for someone like you. Everything about this," he gestured between them, "should be impossible. But here we are." His phone buzzed. Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Voss, we've picked up Malcolm Patterson. He's being held on charges of harassment and making terroristic threats. We'll need both you and Miss Carter to come in and make formal statements." "When?" Tomorrow morning would be ideal. We'll be there. He hung up and pulled Lena close. She felt the tension in his body, the coiled energy of someone who'd been preparing for a fight and wasn't sure it was over. He's in custody, Adrian said. That's something. How long will they hold him? Depends on his bail, but it buys us time. Time for what? For me to finish what I started. The emergency board meeting happened Friday morning. Lena wasn't allowed in. Conflict of interest, Adrian explained. But she waited in his office while he systematically dismantled Richard Chen's career. Marcus came to keep her company, bringing coffee and his usual irreverent commentary. This is brutal, even for Adrian, he said, settling into one of the leather chairs. He's angry. He's protective. There's a difference. Adrian angry is cold and calculated. Adrian protective is a force of nature. Marcus studied her. You know he's in love with you, right? Lena's breath caught. He hasn't said that. He doesn't have to. I've known him for 15 years. I've never seen him like this. Never seen him care about anything more than the company, and now here you are, and he's calling emergency board meetings and ruining people's lives because they threatened you. That doesn't sound healthy. It's not, but it's real. And honestly, I think you're good for him. You make him remember there's more to life than winning. What if I'm not enough? What if this intensity burns out and we're left with nothing but the mess we made? Marcus considered this. Then at least you'll have tried. Adrian doesn't do things halfway, Lena. If he's in this, he's all in. The question is whether you are. Before she could answer, Adrian returned. His expression was grim but satisfied. How bad? Marcus asked. Chen's resigned, effective immediately. And I've made it clear to everyone in that room that betrayal has consequences. No one's going to touch him professionally after this. That's cold. That's business. Adrian looked at Lena. Patterson made bail. Her stomach dropped. What? An hour ago, posted $500,000 and walked. So he's just free? For now, but he has conditions. Restraining order, GPS monitoring. He comes within 1,000 feet of either of us, he goes back to jail. That's not enough. I know. Which is why we're not taking any chances. Adrian pulled out his phone and showed her a booking confirmation. We're leaving the city for a few weeks. The Caribbean, private villa, security on site, completely off-grid. Adrian, I can't just leave. Yes, you can. I've already talked to Karen. You're taking leave, paid, full benefits. When this settles down, you come back, but right now you need to be somewhere Patterson can't find you. And you're just leaving your company? I can run it remotely. The important thing is keeping you safe. Marcus stood. I'll leave you two to argue about this. But Lena? He's right. Get out of the city, let things cool down. Patterson's desperate, and desperate people are unpredictable. He left before she could protest. Lena looked at Adrian. You can't just upend your life because of me. Watch me. He took her hands. I've spent 15 years building this company. It's successful, it's stable, and it runs fine without me micromanaging every decision. But you're irreplaceable. And if something happened to you because I was too stubborn to take precautions, I'd never forgive myself. So we just run? We strategically relocate while the legal system does its job. That's not running. That's being smart. When do we leave? Tomorrow. I've already had your apartment packed up, just essentials, things you'll need for a few weeks. Everything else stays secure. You packed my apartment. I had people pack your apartment. Professionals. I didn't touch your underwear drawer or anything weird like that. Despite everything, she almost laughed. This is insane. Yeah, it is. He pulled her closer. But I'm not losing you to some vindictive criminal who can't handle the consequences of his own actions. So we're going to the Caribbean. We're going to sit on a beach and drink things with umbrellas in them and let Patterson destroy himself from a distance. And then what? Then we come back. We build a life. We figure out how to make this work without death threats and emergency board meetings. He kissed her forehead, but first, we survive. Together. Lena let herself lean into him, exhaustion and adrenaline finally catching up. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to the Caribbean. Let's get the hell out of here for a while. Good. His arms tightened around her. Pack light. I've got everything else covered. The flight left JFK Saturday morning. First class, then a private charter to an island Lena had never heard of. The villa was exactly what Adrian had promised: isolated, beautiful, with security that looked like resort staff but clearly wasn't. Lena stood on the terrace, looking out at turquoise water that seemed impossible, and felt some of the tension start to drain. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Better? Ask me in a week. Fair enough. They spent the first few days doing nothing: swimming, reading, eating food prepared by a chef who appeared and disappeared like magic. Adrian worked a few hours each morning, video calls with his office, but then he'd close his laptop and be completely present. On the fourth day, Lena's phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Ms. Carter, I wanted to update you. Malcolm Patterson violated his restraining order. He was arrested again yesterday. How? He showed up at Harmon and Voss, tried to get into the building. Security stopped him. Police were called. He's back in custody, and this time the judge denied bail. Lena felt something release in her chest. So he's going to trial, and given the violation, he's looking at serious jail time even before we get to the original charges. Thank you for calling. Of course. Enjoy your vacation, Ms. Carter. You've earned it. Lena found Adrian on the beach, staring out at the horizon. Patterson's in jail, she said. Violated the restraining order. No bail this time. Adrian turned to look at her, relief visible. Good. It's over. Yeah, it is. She moved into his arms, and they stood there for a long time, just breathing. What happens now? Lena asked eventually. Now we figure out what comes next. For us. And what do you want that to be? Adrian pulled back enough to look at her face. I want you to move in with me, officially. Not because you're hiding from threats, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build something real with you. That's a big step. We've already taken bigger ones. And Lena, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since that night you told me you weren't sure if the emoji was an accident. Since you looked at me like I was just a person instead of a position. I don't need you to say it back right now, but I need you to know where I stand. Her eyes stung. You're ridiculous. I'm honest. I love you too. Even though you're intense and overprotective and you ruined a man's career because he gave up your schedule. He endangered you. I'd do it again. I know. That's the terrifying part. She kissed him. But yes, I'll move in with you when we get back. His smile was incandescent. Yeah? Yeah, let's see where this goes. They stayed in the Caribbean for 2 more weeks. When they finally returned to New York, Patterson was awaiting trial. Richard Chen had left the industry entirely, and the office gossip about Lena and Adrian had finally died down to manageable levels. Adrian made their relationship public in the most Adrian way possible, a memo to the entire company announcing that he and Lena Carter were in a committed relationship, effective immediately, and anyone who had concerns about conflicts of interest could direct them to HR. Subtle, Lena said when she read it. Effective. Now everyone knows, and no one can say we were hiding it. She moved into his Tribeca apartment the following weekend. Her studio lease ended, her furniture went into storage, and suddenly she was living in a space 10 times the size with a man who owned more suits than she owned anything. It should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home. Claire visited a month later, took one look at them together, and announced, "You're getting married. I give it 6 months." Mom, what? You're 34, Adrian, and you look at her like she hung the moon. Don't waste time pretending you're not already planning the proposal. Lena laughed, but Adrian just smiled. Because Claire wasn't wrong. And in that moment, watching Adrian with his mother in the home they now shared, Lena realized something important. She'd stopped being afraid. Of the relationship, of the intensity, of what people thought. She'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen to build something real even when it was complicated and messy and occasionally involved death threats from vindictive criminals. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Claire's prediction proved optimistic. Adrian proposed 3 months later, not 6. He did it on a random Tuesday in April. No fanfare or elaborate planning. They were in the kitchen of the Tribeca apartment, Lena making coffee while Adrian scrolled through emails at the counter. Morning light streamed through the windows, traffic humming 60 stories below. Marry me, he said, not looking up from his phone. Lena nearly dropped the coffee pot. What? Marry me? This time he did look up, setting his phone aside. I was going to plan something elaborate. Dinner, ring presentation, the whole performance. But then I realized that's not us. This is us. Tuesday morning, coffee, you in my old t-shirt complaining about the espresso machine. I'm not complaining about the espresso machine. You were about to. She was. The thing was temperamental and expensive, and she'd never quite figured out the pressure settings. You don't even have a ring, she said. I have 3, actually. Couldn't decide which one you'd like, so I got options. He pulled a small box from his pocket, apparently he'd been carrying it around, and opened it to reveal 3 different rings. This one's classic, this one's modern, this one's vintage. You pick. Lena stared at the rings, then at him, then back at the rings. You're insane. That's not an answer. Yes. Yes, I'm insane, or yes, you'll marry me. Both. She was crying now, which was stupid because she'd known this was coming. Claire had called it, Casey had called it, even Marcus had sent her a text 2 weeks ago saying he's going to propose soon. Just FYI. But knowing it was coming and having it happen on a random Tuesday were very different things. Adrian came around the counter and took her hands. Which ring? She looked at them again. The classic one was beautiful but impersonal. The modern one was striking but not quite her. The vintage one, an emerald-cut diamond with delicate filigree, was perfect. That one. He slipped it onto her finger. It fit like he'd somehow known her exact size, which he probably had because Adrian thought of everything. I love you, he said, and I want to build a life with you, the boring parts and the complicated parts and everything in between. The boring parts? Grocery shopping, arguing about thermostats, whose turn it is to call the landlord when something breaks. He paused. Except we own this place, so I guess it's always our turn. She laughed through tears. When? When what? When do you want to get married? Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you want. I'm flexible. You're never flexible. I'm flexible about this. As long as it happens, I don't care about the timeline. Lena looked down at the ring on her finger, then up at the man who'd somehow become her entire world in less than a year. Your mother's going to want a big wedding. My mother can want whatever she wants. This is about us. I should probably call my parents. They don't even know we're this serious. So call them. Tell them their daughter's marrying a workaholic CEO with control issues and a tendency to solve problems by throwing money at them. You're really selling yourself here. I'm being honest. They should know what they're getting. She kissed him, coffee forgotten. 6 months. I want 6 months to plan something that feels like us. Not too big, not too formal. Just people we actually like. Done. They told Claire that evening. She took one look at Lena's hand, smiled with deep satisfaction, and said, I told you 6 months. I'm never wrong about these things. It's been 3 months, Mom. Even better. When's the wedding? 6 months from now, Lena said. October then. Perfect. I'll make calls. Mom, we don't need you to... Of course you do. You're both busy, and someone needs to coordinate this properly. I'm retired, I'm bored, and I'm excellent at managing complicated projects. Consider me hired. Adrian looked at Lena. We could argue. Would it matter? Not even a little. Then I guess we're letting your mother plan our wedding. Claire pulled out her phone immediately, already typing notes. Small but elegant. Maybe the beach house? Or somewhere upstate. Definitely not a hotel. Too impersonal. How many people? 50? Lena tried. 80. You'll forget people if you go too small. Trust me. Within a week, Claire had commandeered their dining table, spreading out vendor contacts and venue photos, and seating charts that made Lena's head spin. But she was good at it, ruthlessly efficient, and surprisingly thoughtful about what Lena and Adrian actually wanted. Your mother's terrifying, Lena told Adrian one night. She means well. She asked me 17 questions about floral arrangements today. 17. I didn't even know there were 17 questions to ask about flowers. Just nod and agree. It's easier. That's your strategy for dealing with your mother? It served me well for 34 years. Work became a different kind of complicated. Lena had been promoted after the Patterson case, senior analyst with a team of her own and projects that actually challenged her. Karen had been her biggest supporter, pushing her forward even when Lena worried about appearances. "You earned this," Karen said when Lena voiced concerns. "Patterson audit, your work on the Chen investigation aftermath, the restructuring proposal you put together last month. You're good at what you do. Stop second-guessing yourself." But Adrian recused himself from the promotion decision. "I pushed for this. The other partners pushed for this. You got this job because you're the best person for it, not because you're sleeping with the CEO." It should have made her feel better. Mostly, it just made her aware of how much scrutiny she was under, how many people were waiting for her to fail so they could confirm their suspicions. Casey met her for lunch one afternoon in May, taking one look at her face and ordering wine. "Talk," Casey said. "I'm fine." "You look like you haven't slept in a week." 3 days. "But who's counting?" Lena rubbed her eyes. "I'm just tired. Wedding planning, new job responsibilities, trying to prove I'm not just the boss's fiancée." "You know you don't have to prove anything, right?" "Don't I? Half the office thinks I slept my way into this promotion. And the other half knows you're brilliant. Stop caring about the first half." "Easy to say. Hard to do, I know." Casey sipped her wine. "But Lena, you've been working yourself into the ground for 3 years. You found the Patterson fraud. You built the case against Chen. You've restructured half the accounting department's workflow and saved the company millions in inefficiencies. That's not sleeping your way anywhere. That's being exceptional at your job. Then why do I feel like I'm constantly on trial? Because you care what people think, which is both your greatest strength and your biggest weakness." Casey leaned forward. "You're marrying Adrian in 5 months. You're building a life with him. At some point, you have to decide whether other people's opinions matter more than your own happiness." Lena knew she was right. That didn't make it easier. The Patterson trial happened in June. Lena had to testify, walking through her audit findings while Patterson glared at her from the defense table. His lawyer tried to paint her as vindictive, as someone who'd fabricated evidence to impress her boyfriend. The prosecution tore that theory apart with documentation and expert testimony. Lena's work was airtight. Patterson's fraud was undeniable. He was sentenced to 8 years for the fraud and the harassment charges. The judge was particularly harsh about the stalking and threats, calling it a calculated attempt to intimidate a witness and obstruct justice. Adrian was in the courtroom when the verdict came down. He didn't react visibly, but Lena felt his hand find hers and squeeze. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Questions about the trial, about their relationship, about whether she'd really earned her promotions. Adrian handled it with the ease of someone who'd been dealing with press his entire career. Ms. Carter's work speaks for itself. The trial outcome speaks for itself. And our personal relationship is exactly that, personal. Thank you. They left before anyone could push further. In the car, Lena let out a breath she'd been holding for months. It's really over. Yeah, it is. I thought I'd feel more relieved. Give it time. Trauma doesn't disappear the second the threat does. She looked at him. When did you become wise about trauma? When I spent 3 months watching someone I loved deal with it. He pulled her close. You did good in there. You held your ground. I was terrified. I know. You did it anyway. That's courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Wedding planning intensified as summer wore on. Claire had settled on the beach house for the venue, transforming the property into something elegant but unpretentious. Lena's parents flew in from Minnesota in August to meet Adrian properly. Her father, tall, quiet, with the same careful eyes as Lena, shook Adrian's hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. You're the CEO, Robert Carter said. I am. And you make my daughter happy? I try to. That's all I need to know. Her mother, Anne, was more effusive. She hugged Adrian like he was already family and immediately started swapping stories with Claire about their respective children. They're terrifying together, Adrian observed, watching the two mothers laugh over wine in the kitchen. They're forming an alliance, Lena agreed. We're doomed. Her younger brother Jake was less diplomatic. You're really marrying this guy? He asked Lena while Adrian was occupied with their fathers. That's the plan. He's rich. I noticed. Like, really rich. Your observation skills are sharp today. Jake grinned. I'm just saying, if you screw this up, can I have his car? I saw the Audi in the garage. You're terrible. I'm practical. Also, he seems okay. Little intense, but okay. High praise. I mean it. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room. That's either really romantic or really obsessive, and I'm choosing to believe it's romantic. Lena laughed. She'd missed her brother, his irreverent honesty, the way he could cut through tension with a stupid joke. That evening, all 6 of them had dinner together. Lena, Adrian, both sets of parents, and Jake. It should have been awkward, this collision of worlds. Instead, it felt right. Her father and Adrian talked about fishing, of all things. Her mother and Claire planned potential grandchildren. Jake ate 3 servings of dinner and asked Adrian inappropriate questions about running a company. I like them, Adrian said later, after everyone had left. They're not subtle. Neither are you. It's genetic. My mother asked if we were planning kids yet. My mother asked the same thing. I told her we're still figuring out being married first. Smart answer. I thought so. He pulled her onto the couch. But for the record, when you're ready, if you're ready, I want that. Kids, chaos, all of it. That's a terrifying thought. Which part? You as a father, you can barely handle not working 60 hours a week. I'd figure it out. For you, for them, I'd figure it out. She believed him. That was the thing about Adrian. When he committed to something, he didn't do it halfway. September brought final wedding preparations and a different kind of stress. Dress fittings, menu tastings, rehearsal dinner planning. Lena tried to care about centerpieces and seating arrangements, but mostly she just wanted to be married already. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus threw Adrian a bachelor party that was remarkably tame. Dinner, drinks, no strippers or Vegas trips. Just Adrian's closest friends reminiscing about college and giving him terrible marriage advice. Casey organized Lena's bachelorette party with more enthusiasm. A weekend in the Hamptons with her closest friends, wine, and absolutely no mention of wedding planning allowed. You ready for this? Casey asked on the last night, both of them on the beach watching the sunset. The wedding or the marriage? Both. Lena thought about it. I'm terrified of being someone's wife, of living up to expectations, of screwing this up somehow. But I'm also excited. He makes me want to be braver than I am. That's good. That's really good, actually. You think so? Yeah, because you make him more human. Before you, he was all business, all intensity. Now he actually smiles occasionally, laughs, takes time off without it being a crisis. Casey bumped her shoulder. You're good for each other, even when it's complicated. It's always complicated with him. That's because neither of you does anything halfway. But Lena, if you're going to have a complicated relationship, at least have it with someone who's all in. And he's definitely all in. The wedding day arrived with perfect October weather. Crisp air, clear skies, the ocean calm enough to reflect the afternoon sun. The beach house was transformed. Simple white chairs arranged on the sand, flowers that weren't too formal, everything exactly as they'd wanted. Lena stood in the upstairs bedroom, her mother helping with the last details of her dress. It was simple, elegant, nothing too elaborate. The vintage ring on her finger caught the light. You look beautiful, Anne said, tears already forming. Don't cry yet, we haven't even started. I'm a mother. I'm contractually obligated to cry. A knock at the door. Claire entered, already dressed and looking elegant as always. How are we doing? She asked. She's ready, Anne said. More ready than she thinks. Good, because Adrian's downstairs pacing like a caged animal. I think he's more nervous than you are. Lena smiled. That makes me feel better? It should. He's terrified of screwing this up, which means he cares. That's what matters. The ceremony was scheduled for 4. Lena walked down the makeshift aisle on her father's arm, sand shifting under her shoes, afternoon light turning everything golden. Adrian stood at the end waiting, Marcus beside him, and the expression on his face when he saw her made every moment of anxiety worth it. Hi, she whispered when she reached him. Hi. His voice was rough. You're beautiful. You're biased. Completely. The ceremony was short, the officiant a friend of Claire's who kept it personal but not overly sentimental. They'd written their own vows. Lena had stressed about hers for weeks, but standing there looking at Adrian, the words came easily. I promise to call you on your nonsense when you're being too intense, she said. I promise to remind you there's more to life than quarterly earnings. I promise to be brave with you, even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying. Adrian's vows were typically direct. I promise to protect you without suffocating you, to support your ambitions without overshadowing them, to love you on the boring days and the complicated days and all the days in between. I promise to never take you for granted. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them married. Adrian kissed her like they weren't standing in front of 80 people, and somewhere behind her, Lena heard her mother crying and Claire laughing. The reception was everything a wedding should be: good food, better wine, dancing as the sun set over the ocean. Lena's father gave a speech about watching his daughter grow into someone braver than he'd expected. Claire gave one about finally getting Adrian to slow down enough to build a real life. Marcus gave one that was mostly embarrassing stories from college, but ended with genuine affection. I've known Adrian for 15 years, Marcus said, and I've never seen him happy. Successful? Sure. Driven? Absolutely. But happy? That's new. That's because of Lena. So here's to finding the person who makes you want to be more than what you built yourself to be. Adrian squeezed Lena's hand under the table. They danced as the evening turned to night. Lena in Adrian's arms, the ocean providing soundtrack, surrounded by people who'd become family in the last year. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For what? For saying yes. For trusting me, for building this with me. Thank you for showing up at my apartment that night because of an accidental emoji. He laughed. Best mistake you ever made. Second best. What's the first? Saying yes to dinner. That's when I really committed. No takebacks now. You're stuck with me. Good. They left the reception around 11, sneaking away to the house while the party continued on the beach. Upstairs, in the room they'd shared dozens of times before, everything felt different and exactly the same. We're married, Lena said, still processing. We are. That's insane. Completely. He pulled her close. Any regrets? Ask me in 50 years. Deal. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of Venice, Florence, Rome, eating too much pasta and walking until their feet hurt. Adrian spoke Italian with the locals and navigated the tourist traps with the same confidence he brought to board meetings. Lena let herself relax for the first time in months. No work stress, no wedding planning, just them. We should do this more often, she said one evening in Rome, sitting at a cafe watching the city move around them. Take 2 weeks off? Be present, not thinking 3 moves ahead. I can try. He laced his fingers through hers. I'm better at it with you. That's a low bar. I'm working on it. They returned to New York in November to find their apartment exactly as they'd left it, but somehow different. This was home now, not just Adrian's place where Lena happened to live, but theirs. She'd brought more of herself into the space. Books on the shelves, photos on the walls, her terrible coffee habits firmly established. Work settled into a new rhythm. Lena headed the fraud prevention department now, a role created specifically because she was good at finding what others missed. It was challenging, meaningful, and completely separate from Adrian's sphere of influence. They had rules: no talking business at home unless absolutely necessary, no letting work stress bleed into their relationship, separate professional identities, even if their personal lives were intertwined. It worked. Mostly. There were still hard days. Days when Lena felt like she was being judged for being Adrian Voss's wife, instead of being recognized for her own competence. Days when Adrian got too intense about protecting her, and she had to remind him she could handle herself. Days when they argued about stupid things because they were both stubborn and neither knew how to back down gracefully. But there were more good days. Days when they'd cook together and laugh at how terrible they both were at following recipes. Days when Adrian would leave work early, actually early, not just before 8, to surprise her with dinner reservations. Days when Lena would drag him to art galleries and he'd pretend to hate it, but she knew he didn't. Christmas brought both families together again. Lena's parents and Jake flew in, Claire hosted dinner at her place, and for the first time in years, Adrian looked genuinely relaxed, surrounded by people. You're different, Claire told Lena privately. Both of you. Lighter. Marriage suits us, apparently. It's more than that. You've given him permission to be something other than what he built. That's a gift. He's given me permission to be ambitious without apologizing for it. I'd say we're even. Claire smiled. You're good for each other. I wasn't sure at first. You seem too different, but you balance him, and he steadies you. That's what partnership should be. The new year brought unexpected news. Lena missed a period in January, then another in February. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter for 10 minutes before she could look at it. Positive. She stared at it, emotions cascading too fast to name. Fear, excitement, terror, joy, all of it crashing together. Adrian found her sitting on the bathroom floor, test still in her hand. Lena? He knelt beside her. What's wrong? She handed him the test. He looked at it, looked at her. We're having a baby. Apparently. Are you okay? I don't know. Are you? I don't know either. He pulled her into his arms. But we'll figure it out. You can't just solve this with strategy and resources. Watch me. She laughed despite the tears. You're ridiculous. I'm committed. There's a difference. They told their families in March after the first trimester passed and things felt more certain. Anne cried. Robert looked proud. Jake made jokes about free babysitting. Claire immediately started planning nursery designs. Your mother's already decorating a room we haven't even decided on, Lena told Adrian. That's her love language. Let her have it. Work became complicated in new ways. Lena was determined to keep performing at the same level, to prove she could be excellent at her job and pregnant. But exhaustion hit harder than expected, and there were days when she could barely keep her eyes open through meetings. Take leave, Adrian said one evening when he found her asleep at her laptop. I'm fine. You're exhausted. So are you. I don't see you taking leave. That's different. Why? Because you're the CEO and I'm just... Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't finish that sentence. You're not just anything. But you're also 7 months pregnant and working 60-hour weeks trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. I can't just stop. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to slow down before you collapse. They argued about it for a week before Lena finally agreed to scale back to 30 hours. It felt like failure until Karen pulled her aside. You know you're the only person in this entire company who feels guilty about scaling back while pregnant, right? I just don't want people to think, no one thinks anything except that you're a human being growing another human being. Take the time. Your job will be here when you're ready. Their daughter was born in June, 3 weeks early, and screaming with indignation. They named her Emma after Adrian's grandmother. She was tiny and perfect and terrifying in equal measure. Adrian held her like she might break. I have no idea what I'm doing. Join the club, Lena said from the hospital bed. We're going to screw this up somehow. Probably, but we'll figure it out. Claire visited with enough baby supplies to open a store. Anne and Robert flew in immediately, Jake arriving 2 days later with a stuffed animal bigger than the baby. You're a mom, Casey said, visiting with flowers and the kind of exhausted affection that came from years of friendship. A whole entire mom. I'm aware it's terrifying. You'll be great at it. You're great at everything you actually care about. The first few months were chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, learning Emma's different cries and what they meant. Adrian worked from home as much as possible, taking calls with a baby carrier strapped to his chest, somehow managing to run a company while figuring out diaper changes. This is harder than I expected, he admitted one night at 3 a.m., rocking Emma while Lena tried to catch 20 minutes of sleep. Which part? All of it. Caring this much about something so small, being terrified every second that I'm doing it wrong. You're doing fine. How do you know? Because she's still alive and you haven't had a breakdown yet. That's the bar right now. He laughed quietly. Fair enough. Emma grew. 6 months, then a year. She had Lena's eyes and Adrian's determination, refusing to sleep through the night until she decided she was ready. Lena went back to work part-time when Emma was 4 months old, then full-time when she was 8 months. It was exhausting and rewarding, and some days she wasn't sure which emotion was winning. But they managed. Adrian cut back his hours. Actually cut back. Delegating more, trusting his team. Lena proved she could be exceptional at her job and a present mother, though some days it felt like she was barely holding both together. I don't know how people do this, she told Casey over coffee one Saturday while Adrian had Emma at the park. They don't. They just pretend they do and hope no one notices. That's deeply unhelpful, but honest. Look, you're doing great. Emma's happy, you're still killing it at work, and Adrian hasn't completely lost his mind. That's winning. By Emma's 2nd birthday, they'd found a rhythm. Not perfect, never perfect, but functional. Lena had learned to ask for help instead of trying to do everything. Adrian had learned that being a good father meant being present, not just providing. Together, they'd built something that looked nothing like either of them expected, but felt exactly right. "I've been thinking," Adrian said one evening after Emma was asleep. "Dangerous. I want to step back from the CEO position." Lena looked up from her book. "What?" "Not immediately. Maybe in 5 years. But I want to transition to chairman, let someone else run day-to-day operations, spend more time actually living instead of just working." "Who are you and what have you done with Adrian Voss?" "I'm serious. I've spent 20 years building this company. It's successful, it's stable, and I don't want to miss Emma growing up because I was too busy chasing the next deal. Your father would have a heart attack if he heard you say that." "My father did have a heart attack, and we hadn't spoken in 6 months because he couldn't understand why I'd want a life outside work." Adrian moved closer. "I don't want to be him. I want to be someone Emma remembers being around, not just someone who worked all the time." "That's a big change." "I know, but you changed me. Emma changed me. I finally understand what's actually important." Lena set her book down and kissed him. 5 years, huh? Give or take. Enough time to find the right successor, transition properly. And then what? Then we figure out what comes next, together. 3 years later, Lena was pregnant again. A surprise, given how carefully they'd been planning their lives, but not an unwelcome one. "Emma's getting a sibling," Adrian told his mother. "Good. She needs someone to boss around besides you two." Their son, they named him Daniel, after Lena's grandfather, arrived on a crisp October morning, calm where Emma had been chaotic. He slept through the night at 6 weeks and smiled at everything. "This is suspiciously easy," Lena said. "Don't question it. Just enjoy it while it lasts." Emma adapted to being a big sister with the same determination she applied to everything. She wanted to help with bottles, with diaper changes, with reading books to Daniel, even though he was too young to understand. "She's going to be terrifying when she's older," Adrian observed. "She gets it from you. She gets it from both of us." He wasn't wrong. By the time Daniel was 1, Adrian had begun the transition away from CEO. He'd found his successor, a brilliant woman named Sarah Chen, who'd been with the company for 12 years and had the respect of everyone who mattered. The board approved the transition plan. Adrian would step down in 2 years, move to chairman, and actually have time to breathe. "You're really doing this," Lena said, watching him present the plan to the board. "I really am. No regrets?" "Not even one." The years that followed weren't perfect. Emma struggled in school with math until Adrian spent months working through problems with her every night. Daniel turned out to have Adrian's intensity and Lena's perfectionism, a combination that made him brilliant but anxious. Lena had her own challenges, a merger that went sideways, a team member who undermined her, the constant balance of being excellent at work while being present at home. But they managed. They argued sometimes about parenting choices, about work stress, about whose turn it was to handle the school pickup. But they always worked through it because the foundation they'd built was solid enough to handle the complications. Adrian stepped down as CEO when Emma was 7 and Daniel was 4. The transition was smooth, Sarah taking over with competence and vision. Adrian stayed involved as chairman but with dramatically reduced hours. "I don't know what to do with all this free time," he admitted a month into the new arrangement. "Learn to relax?" "That sounds boring," says the man who used to work 80-hour weeks. "I was younger then, more foolish." "You're 44. You're not exactly ancient." "I feel ancient some days, especially when Emma explains TikTok to me." Lena laughed. "Join the club." They traveled more. Real vacations, not just long weekends squeezed between meetings. They took Emma and Daniel to Minnesota, to the beach house, eventually to Italy where Adrian taught them to order gelato in Italian, and Lena documented everything with terrible photos. Claire watched them one Christmas, surrounded by chaos. Emma reading to Daniel, wrapping paper everywhere. Adrian trying to assemble a toy without instructions. "You did good," she told Lena quietly. "With what?" "All of it." Grounding him. Building a life that's more than just success. "He did the same for me. Taught me I could be ambitious and still have a life." "That's partnership. That's what his father and I never quite managed." She smiled. "But you two figured it out." On their 10th anniversary, Adrian took Lena back to the beach house. Just them, no kids. Claire and Anne had teamed up to handle Emma and Daniel for the weekend. They walked the same stretch of beach where they'd been photographed all those years ago, back when someone was trying to scare them apart. You remember when we were here and Patterson was stalking us? Lena asked. I try not to. But you remember. Yeah, I remember being terrified something would happen to you. Remember thinking I'd do anything to keep you safe. You were a little intense about it. I was a lot intense about it, but I meant every word. I still do. They stood watching the waves, the same ocean that had witnessed so much of their journey. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. The accidental emoji? Saying yes to dinner? All of it? Never. You? Not once. He turned to face her fully. You rewrote my entire life with one impulsive thumb tap. Best accident I've ever been part of. It wasn't entirely an accident. I know. You knew? I suspected, but it doesn't matter. Accident or intention, it brought us here. And here is pretty good. Lena leaned into him, feeling the solid certainty of 10 years together. They'd survived threats and scrutiny and the messy complications of building a life together. They'd created two humans who were brilliant and chaotic and perfect. They'd learned to balance ambition with presence, success with actual happiness. What do you want for the next 10 years, she asked. This. More of this. Watch Emma and Daniel grow up, travel when we feel like it, build businesses or don't. Whatever we want, as long as we do it together. That's not very specific. It's not supposed to be. I spent 20 years with 5-year plans and quarterly projections. Now I just want to see what happens. That's very unlike you. You changed me. You changed me too. They walked back to the house as the sun set, painting the sky in impossible colors. Inside, wine was already poured, dinner waiting. Tomorrow they'd go back to the city, back to their jobs and their kids and their beautifully complicated life. But tonight was theirs. 10 years from the accidental emoji that started everything. 10 years of learning that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, over and over, through boring days and terrifying ones and everything in between. Emma was 12 when she asked about how her parents met. You really sent Dad a fire emoji by accident? She looked skeptical. I really did. That's embarrassing. Very. But kind of romantic. I guess it was. Did you know you'd marry him? Lena thought about it. About that night when Adrian showed up at her door. About choosing to trust something that made no sense. About building a life one imperfect day at a time. No, she said honestly. I had no idea, but I knew I wanted to find out. That's cool, I guess. High praise from a 12-year-old. Emma grinned and went back to her homework, already moving on to the next thing. But Lena sat there for a moment longer, thinking about how one small moment, one accidental tap, had rewritten everything. They'd been lucky. Lucky that Adrian had noticed. Lucky that Lena had said yes. Lucky that they'd both been brave enough to try when everything told them it was complicated and risky and potentially disastrous. But luck only got you so far. The rest was choice. Choosing to stay when things got hard. Choosing to trust when fear said to run. Choosing to build something real instead of something easy. That night, with Adrian reading to Daniel and Emma doing homework and life humming along in its beautifully chaotic way, Lena understood something important. Love wasn't the accidental emoji. It wasn't the grand gestures or the dramatic moments. It was this. The ordinary evenings, the small choices, the decision to keep choosing each other when the novelty wore off and real life set in. It was Adrian looking up from Daniel's bedtime story to smile at her. It was Emma asking for help with algebra, even though she hated asking for help. It was building something that lasted, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. One accidental emoji had started everything, but everything that came after, that was all choice. And Lena Carter Voss, standing in her home with her family around her, wouldn't change a single moment of it.